Can anybody find me a D20 to roll? AHJ in the workshop today, I had this idea for a D20 that basically, instead of the 20 on the top, I was hoping I could cut something out of wood and do like a little inlay effect, which is like if I sand it flush, it'll look like it's inlaid in the die instead of being a number that's inset in it. So I'm going to go ahead and build a D20 from scratch with a blank face D20, or blank 20, and see what we can make from there, all right? This is my intro song, why don't you sing along? Hey, let's see what's up this week, Shop J-Dot. Step 1 is to build the die digitally, and I have it loaded into the slicer, and then I have filled it full of its supports, and I have hollowed out the die so that we can conserve resin, basically. We're not trying to build a solid die, we're trying to build something we can make a mold out of. Punched a couple holes so the excess resin drains out, and there you go, absolutely perfect 3D printed die. I just filled the holes back in with some UV resin after the fact, and then we're going to go ahead and mold it without polishing it because basically it's a prototype and I don't know if this is going to work, so I'm not going to put the effort into polishing it until I know it's going to do what I want it to do. Next step, I found some copper mica powder, and I'm just going to go ahead and line the mold with that. And my first attempt, I tapped it around, but it pretty much stayed at the bottom, so I went for, well, copper, not gold, and definitely poured a bunch more in there. Now this is a beautiful steelwork resin mica color from Mad Micas, and I was hoping for a sort of copper on iron look, and so I'm just going to fill that entire 2-inch mold up with as much black resin as I can pack in there. And you can see it reaches right up to the top there, but during the curing process, after we put it in the pressure pot, pressurize it, let it sit for 24 hours, it has dropped a significant amount. But we soldier on. I am cutting out here the alchemical symbol for copper because I was hoping that this would pop out pretty strong on the copper side of things. And this is going to be our first attempt at inlay. So I cut out this piece after measuring, and I cart it back over to my mold and find that I measured very wrong. So that piece is not going to fit. I'm just going to have to cut another one slightly smaller. So we'll do that again. And it gets a little stuck in there. You got to be delicate so you don't break it. But look, it fits great. And the next thing I'm going to do is fill that in with a bit more black, and I'll top it off with a bit more clear just to make sure it gets nice and stuck in there. I would normally glue it down, but this time I kind of wanted it to float, so I just used a nice piece of packing tape and stuck it on there so it would sit pretty tidily right on top of the mold. Next, I'm peeling that tape off, and you can see that little wood piece is pretty well stuck on there with the cured resin. And then I topped it off with more clear because I was paranoid it wouldn't be high enough. And then we get to do the demold, and we're just going to pop it right out of the mold that we made, and we can see that it is pretty thoroughly encopperified. I used a lot more pigment than I think I anticipated, but that's totally fine. We'll still get that copper on iron look after we do some trimming, because this die is going to require a lot of sanding, and that'll sand off that surface layer of pigment and leave us with a really cool patchy look. So I take it over to the belt sander because this is kind of more resin that I want to sand off with my little table sander. I really want to take it off rapidly and flatly, and I just move it around, and you can see here it looks like hell, basically. Yeah, the belt sander is not really meant to make it pretty, it's just meant to get it flat. So we take it to the 500 grit paper and we start sanding off the scratches that the belt sander left, and that's basically all we're going to do. For the next bit is the polishing process, which is really just sanding off the scratches that the last polishing process left. So we go from 500 grit Zona paper green, and you can see where we took off all of that excess pigment powder when we were doing our sanding, and it looks way cooler now, very grungy and gritty and like that beautiful copper patina over that iron here. And then for that top layer, I'm just going to go through the remaining polishing papers just to make sure we get a really bright shine and can really see that alchemical symbol that we've inlaid in the top. Now it's at the pink layer of Zona that we really start to see our polished shine, and then there's two more after that, the blue, which is 2 microns, and then the white, which is 1 micron, which is pretty much as fine as we're going to get with this here. And you can see that it goes from a frosted frosted illegible symbol to that. And so there we have before and after our 3D printed die, and then that just translates into our alchemical copper die that we just made. Next, I wanted to paint it, and I was thinking, you know, you got to brush out the debris, but I was thinking what better color to paint a copper dye than copper alcohol ink, and I was wrong. Yeah, you can see me here contemplating that and going like, it's a little too matchy-matchy. I don't think there's enough contrast. So I moved that out of the way so I could mix a little gold and a little copper to get a little brighter metallic color going in those numbers. And we're just gonna mixy our painty. This is really just cheap craft paint I found in the back of somebody's house that we were cleaning out. Like, don't always have to be super fancy and have like the most complicated, expensive equipment. You know, craft paint goes quite a long way. And I'm just gonna go ahead and fill in those numbers, and it already looks much better. You get a lot more contrast and can actually see the number pop off the die. So I'm gonna go ahead and paint all the numbers and just wipe off the excess there with a little paper towel. And this is not the final cleaning here. This just gets off the majority of the paint, so that when we do clean it up with a microfiber cloth and some rubbing alcohol, we can really get those details to stand out. And I absolutely love this step because this is where you really see literally the dye shine. Maybe I spend all my time polishing rocks, but you just can't beat shiny math crystals. They're absolutely amazing. Well, that kind of worked. I think if I were going to do it again, I'd give myself a little more patience, fill it up a little further so I actually have some more wood to sand down, so it's like a different texture on the inlay. But I think the proof is in the pudding. I mean, conceptually, we went from, you know, this printed hollow big D20 to the symbol for copper from Alchemy on a really cool copper and black chunky D20. So I think as a start goes, it's a great one. It absolutely went in exactly the direction we wanted it to go. I think I need to polish my mold D20 first so that I can get it shiny all over. I think that would have improved it. And like I said, just filling up the D20 a little more so we get a little more texture on that. I made it too shiny. It's just reflecting light, but yeah, I'm into it. I think it'll work. You can definitely find this guy up in my shop shortly, along with a bunch of other really great dice, so I want to urge you to go check it out. But in the meantime, whether you forgot or not, go take your meds. And remember, if we make nothing else, we're just going to make it a great day, alright? All videos funded by patrons at patreon.com/jdot and viewers like you. Shop hot, shop jdot.